Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who at the end of the video will tell you the meaning of and how to purchase your very own Benny the Butter t-shirt. Now, I'm not going to be talking about Benny the Butter because that's somebody that my stupid fingers invented. I'm going to be talking about Benny the Butcher and his album Tana Talk 4. Now, if you've been watching this channel, you know that I cover everything that Griselda does. Or at least I try. Or at least I started at some point. I started with WWCD. That was the first project I ever heard of theirs. I'm not very keyed into the underground rap scene, so I somehow missed the fact that I've lived and worked in Rochester, New York for the past 12 years, and just an hour and a half that way in Buffalo, some of the greatest hip-hop ever made was being created by a bunch of people very near where I work. So I'm missing a lot of context, obviously. I reviewed Hitler Wears Hermes 8, and I'd never heard Hitler Wears Hermes 1 through 7. I've never heard Tana Talks 1 through 3. Feel free to tell me in the comments what I'm missing, which one is the most important. I'm sure they're all good. The one thing that I will always say whenever I review Griselda is you cannot help but take them for granted. Their level of quality is so high and so consistent that it is hard to have perspective because you're so used to it. It's like being in a good marriage. Like every day I wake up, I love my wife so much, and I'm just so happy that it's easy to sort of forget that, it would be possible to have an up and down terrible marriage. It would be possible to have an up and down terrible rap collective, but that's not the case. They just don't release bad music. At least they haven't yet. So, the beats on this album, mostly produced by Alchemist and by Derringer, are all top level. Benny the Butcher, as always, is engaging, interesting, great rhymes, great cadence. The issue was, it wasn't that I was taking this album for granted. It was that I was being kind of silly. I wanted something from this album that the album wasn't giving me. So let me take you through my process about how the first time I listened to this record, I was like, yeah, this isn't it. This isn't the step up I was looking for. And then how I eventually discovered that I was wrong. So I'm going to give you an example of a song which was the kind of song I wanted. Billy Joe. I'm going to include a link to it up there. This is my stamp of the album, my homework of the album. If somehow you've never heard any Griselda projects, enjoy your first, right there. So, it has the great Alchemist production, very kind of dirty, grimy feeling, organ and choral voices, and then a drum loop, like a loop that ends with a drum fill at the very end. That seems to be a new pattern arising in a lot of hip-hop beats in this underground movement here, this invisible renaissance. A cool kind of like sloppy drums and sloppy fill, and just the whole thing is a beautiful bed for his amazing verses. And this is what I wanted from this album. This is where I thought this album was going, which was in the vein of Burden of Proof, his full-length project from last week, who knows? They released so much music so quickly, in which he talked a lot about the regret, about the trauma of street life, the trauma of being a crack dealer, the trauma of inflicting trauma on people in your neighborhood, on the injustices of the criminal justice system, the injustices of the war on drugs. Good book. Explains how the war on drugs, this is who should have been in jail. When I just even the way this song starts off, Sami Gravano told on bodies, they gave the boy immunity, they give a dope boy life, say we destroying communities. Right there. Sammy the Bull Gravano, I think he was in the Bonanno crime family. I don't know. He was in one of the big crime families in New York. I'm not like a gangster fan. And responsible for many murders, organized crime. The higher up you are, the more damage you actually do. The more responsible you actually are for the plight of the people who are suffering in the impoverished communities in our country. The more money you make off of it, the more power you get from it, the less likely you are to get put in jail. The less likely you are to get killed. The more likely you are to be seen as a hero, no matter how directly and indirectly involved you are with the catastrophe that is unfolding in America's inner cities. And right there, Sammy Gravano, a high-up gangster, he got immunity, and dope boys, people like Benny the Butcher was when he was a crack dealer, get life, and they are blamed for destroying communities. They are the ones who are blamed for destroying the communities. What I really enjoy about this verse is he kind of keeps going on, and he describes the situation that led to him selling drugs. I wasn't good at ish, so selling poison suited me. Even his understanding about his lack of options. Low income based living, my pops avoided schooling me. So how am I supposed to feel? These hoes ain't using me. You know, kind of a cool, like the thing that Benny always does so well, if I can call him Benny, the thing that Benny does so, Mr. the Butcher, the thing that Mr. the Butcher does so well is he mixes together this kind of regret and social commentary on the crack game with specifics of showing that he is also proud of being good at the crack game. So in the pre-chorus, he talks about next time he sells dope, he's going to learn sign language because everything is tapped and there's federal officers everywhere. And in particular, it is the chorus of this song which is not, he doesn't deliver it as though he is trying to make some kind of grand statement. He doesn't. He delivers it flat. He puts you in the mind of a crack dealer, of the best way to make money, the best way to feed off of the fiends who are buying your product. But he does it in such a flat voice that you could be excused for hearing this verse and just think, oh man, he's a cold-hearted killer. He's so cold. Ah, he's so cool. What an awesome outsider gangster figure that we love to admire in American culture up until the point where we have to treat them like human beings, at which point we either kill them or throw them in jail forever and call them animals. You know, the typical American trajectory that we have with outsiders who we simultaneously lionize and intentionally destroy and ignore and marginalize. So this chorus, on the first of the month, I started with a fresh half. I assume that is some quantity of cocaine. Then gave all my fiends rides to get they checks cashed. So he's talking about his customers, and he's driving them to the check cashing place so they can take the money that they earned and get somewhat robbed by the check cashing place, and then take that money and give it to him so they can feed their habit. By the third of the month, I still had the best glass. I assume that's a reference to crack cocaine. I don't know. I served my next door neighbor, my auntie, and my stepdad. So right now in my classes, French 111, I'm teaching the family tree. Right? It's a useful way to teach the verb to have. It's a useful way to teach possessive adjectives, you know, my, your, their, etc. And so when I heard this verse, I pictured little Benny, little Mr. Butcher, there as like a kid in his little box on the family tree. We have his aunt, who he is feeding crack cocaine, whose life is ruined by this substance, and then stepdad. So that doesn't just imply, like, that just... The idea of selling crack to your stepfather implies such unbelievable destruction of the family unit. We already have a divorce that's implied in having a stepdad. And then we have someone so cold-hearted that he's giving crack to his mother's husband. So that also ruins his mother's life. So the entire generation above him on that family tree is completely eradicated and destroyed by the practices of crack cocaine, super free market capitalism, everything that he is embodying and simultaneously denigrating and elevating. To my next door neighbor, his next door neighbor. So we don't only have the destruction of the African American family unit, we also have the destruction of the African American neighborhood, to the point where this guy who lives in this place sells crack to his neighbor. So when we think about what home is family and neighborhood. It has all been completely destroyed by this practice. I think he's doing this on purpose. I think he's delivering it so flatly so we can hear it and kind of nod our heads and sort of say, oh, you know, cool rap songs, Mr. the Butcher, when in reality he's outlining the true devastation. And this is what I've recently actually been coming to understand, because I get uncomfortable talking about rap that's about crack, because I grew up in amazing privilege. The crack epidemic, I grew up during the crack epidemic, and it didn't affect me. Except that when I was a kid, I thought my favorite basketball team lost their prospect to crack. Turns out it was cocaine, not crack. But still, like, I was untouched. Totally untouched. Completely. Now, the entire society that I was living in, underneath me, was being hollowed out and destroyed. But I was totally untouched. So I feel uncomfortable, which is why I think we need to change the way we think about crack rap music as an indictment, as a comment on, even when it seems to be glorifying it, and even when it is glorifying it, fundamentally it is a reminder of our failure as a country. It's a reminder of our failure of the impoverished. That's what it is. It's our failure. It's our failure being reflected back to us. That's what it is. So don't come at me with the 80s were so great and I love Back to the Future. Great. This is the truth. I served my next door neighbor, my auntie, and my stepdad. That's the truth. So that's what I wanted from this album, Benny the Butcher. That's what I wanted. And this is the only song that really hits it that hard. And I thought there was a trajectory here where he was moving along, and based on the projects that I'd heard, it seemed as though he was moving there. And not to mention, GDMM by Conway the Machine came out, last week? And that was very much on this same tip, on the same idea of a much more emotionally invested commentary on the life that they live and what that says about our society and about themselves. But I was wrong. I was short-sighted. I wanted to see what I wanted to see. And if there's one lesson I can give you as a professor on this channel, it's don't listen to yourself, listen to the artists. You can decide not to like what they're doing, but take them seriously, because they're the ones who are making art. Your expectations are useless, are pointless. I don't care if you didn't like episode 1 because you wanted Darth Vader. Take off the blinders and see what the artist is giving you. What helped me to remember was Benny the Butcher did an interview with Hot 97, The Breakfast Club. And I don't usually recommend interviews at all because they're usually not particularly engaging, I find. I mean, sometimes they are. And this one gave me a lot of clarity as to who he is. Because he was somebody who is very clearly confident in his skill, aware of his worth, humble, ambitious. But you could tell he was hungry. He wanted that recognition. He takes his work very seriously. He was just signed to Rockefeller Records. He doesn't have the chain yet. He wants the chain. He wants to earn the chain. And you could feel that where he is right now, even though he was just shot, right? Even though he just had this whole, he could have made the entire album about being shot. He could have made the entire album development of this theme of crack in the inner city. No. There's one line in a song where he says, "Money not enough, I want credit." That's the theme of this album. It's about his journey in the record industry. It's about his progress as an artist. This album is about his art, how it is perceived, how it is monetized, how it is in respect to other artists. He makes multiple references to Jay-Z in the late 90s. At one point he calls himself, "I'm Hov in 99." And what I feel is that he is desperate, and I'm right there with you, Mr. the Butcher. He is desperate for the late 90s Jay-Z. Because he could be that. He's good enough at writing simple, fun choruses. His voice is good enough. He's engaging enough. He could be that. The problem is, that's not what the culture wants. That's not what the mainstream wants. That's what we want. People who are watching this video, that's what we want. We want Hov in 99. But you can feel that pain, that that's really what he wants, and that's what this album is about. With that in mind, this album is awesome. It might even be better than The Plugs I Met, too. It might even be better. This might be his best project that I've ever heard. So I'm going to go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker. Have a sip of coffee. It's kind of a little bit of a wild opening. I don't know. Do you like it when I get all preachy like that? Do you wish I wouldn't? You can tell me in the comments. I can't really stop myself, but I can maybe turn it down to 9 off of 11. So I'm going to go through the album a little bit more quicker. Johnny P's Caddy is the first song, and this was a single. That's with J. Cole, and just when this single came out, I was so excited because it's just an amazingly great beat by Alchemist. The whole thing, just a great verse about his come up, about, this is Benny the Butcher talking about his come up, making it clear that that's what this album is about. It is about his ambitions as a rap artist. I love little details talking about coming up in the streets is making him check his mirrors. That's, that the streets are never that far from him. I love the line, besides Con and West, who do I gotta respect? It's funny because when I first heard it, I heard him say, besides Kanye West, who do I gotta respect? Just mark it. Someone at some point is going to quote that and say, besides Kanye West, who do I gotta respect? It opens up with Don't Feel As Good As It Looks. This seems to be a tie to the other Benny the Butcher projects I mentioned, where he spent a lot of time talking about how the fame and the money isn't as good as you think it is. One thing that I like is how he connects, and I think this must be on purpose. He connects the verses to the themes of physics. So the first line, okay, so I'm going to outline this, how the first line of Benny the Butcher's verse connects to a later line by J. Cole. So Benny says, this ain't my story about rags to riches, more about how I mastered physics. J. Cole, Eureka Einstein on the brink of the theory of relativity, really no MC equal, feel me. I think those are connected. So we have the Benny line, which is clear. He's saying this isn't about rags to riches. He has money. He wants respect, how he mastered the physics of the rap game. And then later, J. Cole, Eureka Einstein on the brink of the theory of relativity, really no MC equal, feel me. God damn it, how has nobody done this before? How has nobody made this joke before? I mean, when I was a kid in middle school, I used to joke. It's a thing people do. They come up with like fake rap names. So I used to call myself MC Squared or MC Escher. And that was like my joke. Like, not a funny joke. I was a 13-year-old from suburban Boston. Like E equals MC squared. So is the theory of relativity. Einstein on the brink of the theory of relativity. No MC equal. How I mastered the physics. E equals MC squared. It's all together. I'm really happy that I reviewed J. Cole. I'm really happy that I reviewed his album, even though I missed it when it came out. This is a great verse. This is going to be a guest verse of the year contender. It is just an amazing verse. And it's wonderful because J. Cole, he's often criticized for what he isn't. He's not like Benny the Butcher. He's not going to be telling all these lines and all this stuff. He's not going to be talking about life of crime and all that. But he doesn't try to be Benny the Butcher. He's just J. Cole. And it shows the dynamism of the Griselda format, of Benny the Butcher, that they go together just perfectly. There's no conflict. There's no incongruity in between these rappers appearing together. It's great. Next song is called Back 2. I haven't listened to Back 1, so maybe I won't get this. This is by Derringer. The whole album is back and forth, Derringer and Alchemist. And it's just great. It feels like they're kind of competing with each other. Who wins? I'll tell you at the end of the video. This has got Stove God Cooks on it, and Stove God Cooks is he's just a wonderful addition. Very kind of harmonious beat, slightly altered halfway through, which is nice. This is the kind of beat that's so good that the first time I was listening to it, I had to go talk to my colleague. I was listening in my office. I think I had the coolest office, by the way, in my school. Because you walk by, I'm liable to be just blasting Benny the Butcher. So I had to press pause and go down and talk to my colleague about some kind of assessment report, student learning outcome. And then when I went back and I realized I got to listen to the beat some more. like I had the beat in my head, and like, so I don't know if you ever had that feeling, but like where you get so excited to listen to the music that you're listening to that you miss it while you're away from it is just great. Stove God Cooks is always, he's so underrated because he should be everywhere. Because he adds something. He has this world-weary voice that's kind of sing-songy. He does a lot of what West Side Gun is able to do with being a street rapper while also being a good sort of spice to flavor a song. But he's better at it, you know? I mean, obviously, I give West Side Gun so many flowers for so many things. But just Stove God's able to just be a better spice, I think. And even his verse was cooking hard with my left, parallel parking my Lex, hear the barking from the bundles, had that dog food on deck. My last check looked like I play for the Nets, but we ain't breaking no sweat. We in the rental about to freeze, don't you turn up the degrees, it's a brick in the vent. You know, all these little details of having the cocaine in the vent of the car, and like the Brooklyn Nets overpay everybody. That's how they're trying to build a legacy. Like a really cool reference there, and talking about dog food, which I've recently learned refers to heroin. I don't know. I don't sell or consume heroin. But just great verse. Love the back and forth. Love the way it plays. Next song is Super Plug. This is just Benny with Alchemist. This is really where it's clear, like we're getting this back and forth. There's a theme of competition on this album, which we'll get to later. But this does feel like two producers being like, all right, Al, here you go. All right, Derringer. Very atmospheric beat. The thing I like about this beat in particular is there's an ominous quality to it that increases as it leads up to the chorus. The chorus itself, so there's an ambiguity always with this album, because half the time it feels like he's talking about how he doesn't want to just be about the streets or how the streets are bad, and then other times he's just proud of how good he is. I turn that 1 to a 2, turn that 2 to a 3, and turn that to a dub. So it's interesting, the idea of like this capitalistic dream of learning to go up to a double. You know, Bozo did the dub, kind of a whole like exponential growth thing. But it does undercut the other points a bit. Weekends in the Perrys, another Alchemist beat. This is maybe the most Alchemist beat. I don't know, because it has lots of nice little changes, a cool little loop at the end. The Alchemist will often do that at the very end of a song. He'll just like add an extra beat. You're like, why wasn't that a beat? He talks about stepping on bricks of fentanyl before you heard about it. And this is where I want to talk about privilege and about the difficulties that I've been having. You know, how I talk about the abstract of talking about crack rap and about the communities that it's devastated and feeling terrible about talking about it because it hasn't hurt me. I have been affected by fentanyl. Somebody I care about has died from fentanyl. So it's weird. It's weird because fentanyl makes like a few appearances on this album, and I realize, you know, that a lot of this crack rap must be very, very, very difficult to listen to for people who are affected personally by it. Because every time I hear the word fentanyl, I get sad. I think about loss. And this is my privilege talking, right? Because my aunt, to my knowledge, never did crack. You know, like my neighbor, to my knowledge, didn't either. So there is something about that where I think this is actually good because it's making this abstract epidemic, which this person participated in, more direct, more of a feeling. Do you get my point on that? That like I'm uncomfortable, and I should always be uncomfortable when I think about the devastation and death and misery that has been visited upon the world, you know, by the dope boys who are responsible for everything. You know, the 15-year-old, 16-year-old kids who don't see much hope and end up wrapped up in this world of crime. Must be their fault. They're the ones who should be in jail. God damn, I'm preachy today. I can't help it. I can't help it. So Boldy James is on here, and again, so the thing about Benny the Butcher is he's great, but he's very sort of standard in a way. Like his flow isn't particularly dynamic, or exciting. It's just very down the middle. So Boldy with this kind of sleepy attacking verse is perfect. The same way that Still of God Cooks is perfect. This is part of the reason why Griselda works so well, that they're all kind of mixed together. Although I was never bored by Benny the Butcher solo, so that's nice. Had to quit blazing cigarettes, was 2 time in my dame, I'm a bigamist. Just kind of an interesting line from Boldy, kind of talking all the stress and the strain, left it disconnect, talking about his brain. Like, but the gang, half the blame, I live with regret, my brain a bit of a wreck. So talking about the psychological impact of the crack trade. It's not that that isn't a part of this album. It is. The psychological toll of the crack business is a part of this album. But I thought that was going to be the center, when really it's not. To undercut my point directly, let's talk about the next song, 10 More Commandments, produced by Derringer, and featuring Diddy. P. Daddy. Puff Diddy. I don't know about this song. So, you know, obviously this is in communication, talking with Notorious B.I.G. in the song 10 Crack Commandments. But the beat for 10 Crack Commandments is so remarkable, the DJ Premier, that this beat, even though it's good, like, it doesn't have that strength. And maybe it's not trying to have that strength. I mean, there's not, like, he gives Crack Commandments 20 through 11, and he doesn't break them up, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like Biggie does. It's a little bit less goofy, a little bit less fun. So I think it's maybe the least successful song on the album, but it's also the song on the album this will be most remembered for. So I don't know what to do about that. He should have counted up. That's my main problem. Biggie counts up. He goes 1 to 10, not 10 to 1. This goes 20 to 11. So my Crack Commandments are all mixed up because I think partly what he's trying to do, he's partly trying to write just new Crack Commandments in general. And I'll get to that. So these are the 20 Crack Commandments. Count money. Don't burn a plug. Test your product. Take care of your people. Don't just spend your money. If you do spend money, spend it on things you can sell. Lead by example. Get off of social media. I love this. He calls that a greedy emotion. Beautiful, you know, because Biggie never had to deal with social media and get away from that greedy emotion. Number 12, respect is super important. And number 11 is get out of the game. I think in reality, we're supposed to hear 11 as number 1. We're supposed to hear this as this is how you're a drug dealer. Don't deal drugs, which is the main lesson that I think Benny the Butcher is trying to get across through his music. Here's something I've never said and never thought I would say in my entire life. The best part of this rap song is when Sean Puffy Combs is talking. Ouch. I just got hit by all these down votes. Oh, you can't see the ratio, but the ratio, right there. I can't help it. Puffy has the best, has the best part of this album, of this song. Because he's talking about getting out of it, and he says, we are one of the world's greatest commodities, black culture, baby. This line inspired me. To my next video, I'm finally going to do it. I'm going to make my video essay about why hip-hop is the most important artistic movement in human history. And it's true. And it does come from black culture, from African-American culture. And I just love having Puffy being the one who says it right here in the middle. Like, I'll appear on your thing, but like where this leads to death. And where he's trying to lead is to a much more positive place. Way to go, Diddy. You did it. God damn it, I'm a dad. I don't have notes. I have notes, I don't have a script. So when I said you diddied it, that just came from me organically. So don't judge my joke. You diddied it, Diddy. Good. Next song is Tyson versus Ali, produced by Derringer and featuring Conway. Cool kind of piano loop here. So when I'm talking about the competition, to a certain extent, it's Tyson being Alchemist and Ali being Derringer, these two producers fighting. And the theme of hip-hop as being competition is part of what makes it such an interesting art form. It's always been that way. References to sporting greats, to wrestlers, to boxers, to teams, whatever it is, the competition of sports is often represented in the competition of hip-hop. But what's interesting here is ostensibly this is a song about Benny the Butcher versus Conway. And I just heard the Conway album. I just reviewed it. Check it out. I'll put a link to it at the end of this video. It'll be up there in one of those little boxes, okay? But they're together. They're friends. They're cousins. They're on the same label. They've come up together. But they're constantly pitted against each other as to who's better. And the thing about this song is it ties so well to the last song. Because really, it's about brotherhood. It's about support. They are just loving each other. They are expressing love, man to man. This song might as well be called "I Love You, Man," because they are just giving each other respect. They are acknowledging the differences. Benny is always very careful to basically cede the battle to Conway, which is amazing. I mean, what rapper ever does that? And if they do that, when do you respect them? Maybe that's why he's on with J. Cole, because J. Cole is also willing to say that he's not the best, which people think makes him weaker, when in reality, a true master uses their weaknesses. Anyways. So we had this debate. By the way, if I have to pick one, I'm going to pick Conway. Not because he's a better rhymer. I don't think he is. I think Benny probably has better rhymes. But just the flow. I just prefer Conway's flow. I like the sound. I just like the way his voice is. But that's the way I like the rap battles. It's like trying to decide between Biggie and Jay-Z. It's like the differences are, So what I think is funny is that also in the context of the last song, Tyson versus Ali can, to a certain extent, I think, be Benny versus Biggie. Benny versus Jay-Z. Tyson versus Ali is a question of generations, right? Tyson was in the 80s, Ali was in the 60s and 70s. So I think there is, and he's not saying this out loud, but I think there is this kind of question of, I think this is another way of Benny saying he is Jay-Z of 2022. But he doesn't even have to say it. Because if you want to compare Conway and Benny, that's more like Ali versus Foreman, like two contemporaries. That's more Holyfield and Tyson, right? That's a little bit more of that. Okay, enough talking about boxing. I actually like boxing. It's weird. You wouldn't think I like boxing because I don't like violence, but I guess you wouldn't think I like hip-hop so much. I don't like violence. It's a big theme. Next song is called Uncle Bun, produced by Derringer, featuring 38 Special, who's part of the Black Soprano family, I believe, with Benny the Butcher. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. This made me realize something about the other features on the album. The other features are just verse and verse. This is all interwoven. It's all interconnected. And I really enjoy that. I really like the way that it's all connected, and he has an interesting voice as well. I like the line where Benny says, "Make sure everybody eat, think like a socialist." It's funny because I often talk about how the rise of crack rap is very much connected to the rise of Reaganomics and the rise of free market capitalism and the way that we know it. The fact that it continued through the Clinton era makes sense because Clinton just was basically Reagan with a different name and slightly better policies in some ways, but certainly not when it comes to free market capitalism or devastatingly handling the criminal justice system in a terrible way. So the idea of him calling himself a socialist is kind of funny and kind of interesting. Then followed up by talking about giving crack to pregnant women because he's not a social worker. So he calls himself a socialist and then immediately undercuts that idea. Very kind of catchy and menacing chorus. One of my favorite lines on here, just as far as like a badass crack rapper line: "Catch me at the boatyard, not boarding yachts, just unloading raw." So unloading raw bricks of cocaine as opposed to trying to be there on a yacht. I don't know. That's a pretty good line. Thowie's Revenge is produced by Alchemist. Very cool, almost like medieval sounding horns. This is where I realized he's sort of at his most comfortable. Like I think Benny is at his most comfortable over an Alchemist beat. even though he came up with Derringer, and Derringer is the sort of in-house producer, there's a real good flow between Alchemist and Benny. Next song is The Stamp with Billy Joe. And then we get to Guerrero, which is by Beat Butcher and Derringer and features West Side Gun, a great bloopy beat. This is maybe the most... So I haven't mentioned Wu-Tang Clan. Obviously, the Wu-Tang Clan is the sort of the sonic father of all the Griselda sound, the griminess and the great loops and the sort of atmosphere. And this has the most successful Wu-sounding song with this hiss on the bass that's just so good. West Side Gun is just so good. Just such a great compliment. That same way that Still God Cooks was. A great flow from Benny on here. Like, keeps on quoting O in the beginning. I was barely known, but see, I bodied every flow. That's part of his, I was barely known, but see, I bodied every flow. The other day, my dad was asking me, what do I mean by flow? Like this. I was barely known, but see, I bodied every flow. There's like 1,000 ways of saying what he's trying to say, but just that line. I'm going to say it one more time. I was barely known, but see, I bodied every flow. That but see right there just breaks it up. I can't stop saying it. You know what? I'm going to let you say it. Every once in a while I do what's called the Dora the Explorer moment, in which I ask you to say something while you're sitting alone at your cubicle, or while you're sitting at home watching my video, or while you're listening to my video and, I don't know, cooking up raw, okay? So, can you say, I was barely known, but see, I bodied every flow? Very good. It's just a small example of what makes Benny's style so strong. He also rhymes with the word cilantro, which is one of my favorite foods in existence. There used to be, near where I worked, a burrito place, and they had to put a button that said extra cilantro, and they called it the professor button, because I would go in every week and I'd ask for extra cilantro on my burritos. Next song is Buster Brick Nick, and we're going to get back to this larger theme I've been talking about. It's by Alchemist, and a nice light high flute. There's like a sort of like a high sample. It's maybe a flute or a keyboard. It's very high up there. It's hard to figure out the instrumentation. And then a super low bass at the same time, which of course gives lots of space for Benny to be in the middle. And here he talks about his bullet wound. Before a bullet wound, there was ish that permanently hurt me. So we're going back to that theme, which I said he isn't talking about on this album enough, but he actually does. The ish that permanently hurt me obviously was what he had to do in the crack game. In a wheelchair, it was hard to smile on my 36th birthday. Being honest, this could be karma I probably deserved in the first place for the ish I did. So this whole shooting, it makes sense that he's not talking about how unjust it was, because he feels as though he deserved it for selling crack to his neighbor and his stepdad and pregnant women. And then on this song, he also talks about how he doesn't write love songs, about how he didn't go Hollywood. And this is where I really want to tie back to this larger theme of the album. And I believe this is the song where he says, money ain't enough, I want respect. Is that this whole song is like he's just talking about like all the great things that he does and how great he is and how interesting he is as a rapper and as a person. And he's not complaining, like he's not whining. He's not saying like, how come nobody likes me? It's like he doesn't understand, or he's just trying to understand. And he's trying to get us to understand. You know, like think about how many rappers there are like Benny the Butcher out there. You know, I mean, hell, I'm using this as a... this just happens to be behind, Ransom and Rome Streets, like these like real masters of rhyming who are respected, who are successful, who are able to make a living, but just they're not Jay-Z yet. And they should be Jay-Z. They should be. In a better world, I think they would be Jay-Z by now. But they can't be, just because of the way our market is and the way people are consuming music and the way they're consuming hip-hop and they want Drake. Fine. They want Drake. They want Drake. We don't want Drake. They want Drake. It's fine. So I love this theme and how it's developed along with that other theme that I thought I wanted more, because it does give a fuller view and it's more honest. I don't think he is in the phase of actually dealing drugs. I think he's remembering it. I think he's working through his trauma, and then he's trying to figure out how to get to the next stage. And the funny thing is, this isn't even his big album. Like, he has a big album coming out, his debut with Rockefeller Records. I'm going to be right back here talking about Benny the Butcher again. Benny the Butter, one more time. The album ends with Mr. Chow Hall by Alchemist. And here, just this whole verse. 5 bands the cops got in Houston after the shooting. They took it from me. So he was shot in Houston in, I think, a Walmart parking lot, shot in the leg. The police took the money from him. They tried to get me to come pick out of a lineup, but I was useless. In the hospital bed shot, the questions they asked, I was clueless. The position that I got as a gangster, I won't abuse it. So there he is, describing how he won't even snitch on the people who shot him. Which, I'm not really big into the no snitching thing. That's a position I think it's important to stop people from doing bad things, but that's just me. But still, how true he is to the code. Then he makes it political. The politicians in my city can't believe I got this off of music. It's effed up how y'all view it, like I'm still dropping off units. And then, so he talks about getting shot. He talks about being true to the code. Rule number 12, you have to have respect, right? They say West the brains and Benny is the star. Conway's the silliest with the bars. Well, I couldn't agree more. So there he is once again putting himself in the context of Griselda, giving the brains to West Side Gun, while of course Benny the Butcher is also very smart, which comes through in his lyrics. Conway is the silliest with the bars, meaning the best rapper. And he admits that, while he is, of course, very smart. He's able to show his position sort of right down the middle between Mr. Smarty Pants and Mr. Great Rapper, and just accepting it with humility. The previous song, he talks about giving back to his community with humility. That's who he is. He's like a super likable guy. That's one thing I got from the interview and I got from this album that's hard to get when, he talks so much about selling fentanyl and giving pregnant women crack, That's how likable he is as a person. And then the whole thing ends with him talking about label beef. Like, he names labels and then has them blacked out. Like, that's the thing that's censored. And it's very clear that that's where he is right now. He knows his worth, but how can he get other people to recognize his worth? How can he navigate the rap game? You could do I could have made this entire video just cherry picking just the parts about the record industry, and you see how this person who's in a liminal position between stardom and superstardom, like trying to figure out how to get there, trying to figure out how to move into the next range, and commenting on it and talking about it while being surrounded by his family and his friends who are trying to do the same thing and trying to get there from different means. This is an amazing document of this point, of this group, Griselda. And I always say it, we're just lucky to be in the same world as them as they're making music at the same time. So, let me talk to you about my merch. So, I've been doing this thing of limited edition merch, and it hasn't been working. I haven't sold one yet. Well, okay, well, you can't read my notes. Wait, daylight saving starts tomorrow? That's my favorite day of the year. Okay, so, this is the deal. When I became a dad 16 years ago. And when you become a father, you get what I call dad hands. Your fingers get chunkier and your hands get stronger. I think it's because, I don't know what it is. This isn't scientific, but think about your dad's hands. Have you ever seen anything more strong and more capable of tensile strength? That happens, While the mother gestates the baby, the dad gets monkey fingers, gets gorilla fingers. So when I take notes in the Notes app, and I got these dad thumbs, these dad hands that sometimes type the wrong thing. I mean, you should see my dad when he texts. I mean, he's my dad. He's a grandfather, so his fingers are like tree trunks. It's very hard. It's very hard to be all this way when you're a dad. So when I typed in Benny the Butcher, I accidentally typed in Benny the Butter. So this is limited time merch. just until the end of March. I made one of these for Donda 2, the Drumpus merch. That's limited too, but I haven't sold one yet, so that's super limited. I think that's a good design. You want to have some real underground merch. We're talking nobody has it. We're talking Balenciaga is just standard. Balenciaga might as well be sold at Kohl's. That's how rare that is. These are my Patreons. They're the people who give me money so that I can buy albums like that Ransom and Rome Streets album. So thank you to the 43 of you. I gotta cross a couple of you off because a couple of you left, but it's easier for me to give you credit than it is for me to take you away. And I thank you for supporting me at all. So thank you to all these people. Stay tuned on this channel to my video about why hip-hop is the most important artistic movement in the history of humanity. Until next time, there's the camera.